This expensive water is too clean for dirty people like you. Kevin Henderson's words sliced through Meridian Grocery's weekend crowd. The store manager stood over Dorothy Washington, 67, clutching an empty Evian bottle like a weapon. Without warning, he dumped every drop over her silver hair. Water exploded across her navy church dress. Kevin's boot kicked her fallen purse, scattering pills and reading glasses across the floor. He grabbed his phone, snapping photos as water dripped from her pearl earrings. "Everyone look, free entertainment," Kevin announced to the growing crowd. "Guess some people never learned basic hygiene." Dorothy knelt in the puddle, calmly collecting her medication bottles. Her voice stayed steady as water pulled around her knees. "Water will find its way." 15 customers stared. 5 phones were recorded. 1 live stream had already started. Have you ever been so humiliated that you felt like drowning only to discover you were actually the ocean? The puddle spread like spilled ink across the white tiles. Dorothy remained kneeling, methodically gathering her scattered belongings while Kevin circled her like a predator, savoring its catch. "Ma'am, the community pool is 6 blocks down," Kevin announced loudly. "This is a premium grocery store, not your personal bathing facility." Several customers chuckled nervously. Others shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to intervene. Dorothy's fingers found her cracked reading glasses. Water still dripped from her chin as she carefully folded them into her purse. Kevin stepped closer, his shadow falling across the puddle. "Look at this mess you've created," he said, pointing at the water stains. "My promotion interview is in," he checked his watch dramatically. "Exactly 10 minutes, and now I have to deal with this disaster." Sarah Lane, 28, had been live streaming her grocery haul when the incident erupted. Her phone now captured everything from aisle 8. Viewer count climbing rapidly. The chat exploded with outrage. "Call the police. This is assault. Where is this store? Hey everyone," Sarah whispered to her phone. "I'm witnessing straight-up discrimination at Meridian Grocery on 5th Street. This manager just poured water on an elderly black woman for asking about honey prices." Kevin noticed the filming and grinned. "Perfect. Get this for your social media. Maybe she'll go viral. Soggy shopper disrupts local business." He struck a mock pose beside the kneeling Dorothy. The live stream viewer count hit 847. Dorothy slowly stood, water still streaming from her dress. From her soaked purse, several items had scattered. Prescription bottles, a tissue packet, and what appeared to be an airline boarding pass. Kevin snatched the boarding pass before she could retrieve it. "Kenya Airways business class," he read aloud mockingly. "What's this? Pretending you can afford international flights. These are probably fake." He waved the pass above his head like a trophy. Dorothy's voice remained calm as mountain snow. "Young man, I'd like to speak with your corporate office." Kevin threw back his head and laughed. "Corporations don't take calls from people like you. They deal with actual customers, people who can afford our premium products without causing scenes." He gestured toward her dripping form. "Look at yourself. You're literally dripping on my clean floors." Assistant manager Jessica Torres emerged from the back office, drawn by the commotion. At 34, she'd worked retail long enough to recognize trouble, but Kevin was her direct supervisor, and his promotion would mean her own advancement. "What's the situation here?" Jessica asked, though the scene spoke for itself. "This woman created a disturbance and damaged store property," Kevin explained smoothly. "She's been hostile and uncooperative. I tried to help her, but she became aggressive." Dorothy continued picking up her belongings with quiet dignity. Her Cartier watch, somehow still elegant despite the water damage, caught the light as she reached for a fallen pill bottle. "I simply asked about a price discrepancy on the organic honey," Dorothy said softly. The shelf price showed $8.99, but it scanned at $12.99. Kevin snorted. "Ma'am, if you can't afford premium products, maybe try the dollar store. They have more suitable options for your budget." The crowd had grown to nearly 20 people. Some filmed, others whispered among themselves. A few customers quietly moved to different aisles, clearly uncomfortable with the scene unfolding. Sarah's live stream chat was now a torrent of angry comments. "Someone call corporate now. This is 2025. How is this happening? I'm never shopping at Meridian again." Kevin's confidence soared as he played to his audience. "Folks, this is what happens when people don't understand appropriate behavior in upscale establishments. Some people just don't know their place. Dorothy finished collecting her belongings and stood slowly, water droplets creating a small constellation around her feet. She pulled out her phone with hands that barely trembled. Every drop creates ripples, she said quietly, looking directly at Kevin. Kevin checked his watch again. 2:18 p.m. 12 minutes until my regional director call, he announced proudly to Jessica. Perfect timing to show I can handle difficult situations professionally. Dorothy pressed a number on her phone. Not 911, not customer service. A number she knew by heart. Kevin was already planning his promotion story, oblivious to the digital wildfire spreading across social media. Number Meridian discrimination was beginning to trend locally. Corporate Twitter mentions were multiplying like cells dividing. The water puddle remained on the floor, evidence of what had transpired. Kevin demanded that Dorothy clean it up before leaving, but she simply stood beside it with the poise of someone who had weathered far greater storms. Truth spreads like water, Dorothy whispered, her finger hovering over the call button. The tide was about to turn. At 2:19 p.m., Dorothy pressed call. The number connected immediately. Kevin continued his performance, energized by the growing audience and his approaching promotion interview. He'd positioned himself strategically near the water puddle, using it as a prop in his narrative of maintaining store standards. Security to ISISL 7, Kevin announced over the store intercom. We have a customer refusing to leave after creating a disturbance. 2 security guards responded within minutes. Marcus Williams, head of security and a 15-year veteran, surveyed the scene with practiced eyes. The water stain told its own story. Dorothy stood calmly beside it, phone pressed to her ear, speaking in tones too low to overhear. Behind the customer service counter, teenage cashier Ashley Martinez fumbled with her register, clearly disturbed by what she'd witnessed. Her supervisor, Janet Kim, tried to maintain normal operations while stealing glances at the commotion. What's the situation? Marcus asked, though his expression suggested he'd already formed an opinion. Kevin launched into his rehearsed explanation. This woman has been disruptive, argumentative, and damaged store property. She's creating an unsafe environment for our customers and refuses to take responsibility for her actions. Marcus looked at Dorothy, still dripping slightly, then at the enthusiastic crowd filming everything. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to Marcus, Dorothy said gently, ending her call. I understand you're doing your job. Please proceed as you see fit. Something in her tone made Marcus pause. He'd worked security long enough to recognize authority when he heard it, regardless of how it was packaged. Kevin, oblivious to the undercurrent, pressed his advantage. As you can see, she's been uncooperative from the start. Some people just don't understand how to behave in quality establishments. Sarah's live stream had exploded. Over 3,200 viewers now watched the confrontation unfold in real time. The chat moved too fast to read, but the sentiment was unmistakable. Multiple people were posting the store's phone number, urging others to call and complain. The store's landline began ringing incessantly. Ashley looked helplessly at Janet, who was already overwhelmed by the influx of angry callers demanding to speak with management. In the corporate offices downtown, phones were already ringing. Kevin gestured dramatically at Dorothy's water-stained dress. Look at the mess she's made of herself in our store. This is exactly why we have standards and policies. Some customers simply don't meet our establishment's expectations. The crowd murmured disapprovingly. A middle-aged black man in a business suit stepped closer, his jaw clenched with barely contained anger. That's enough, he said quietly. Kevin spun around. Sir, if you have a problem with how I manage my store, you're welcome to shop elsewhere. I'm running a business here, not a charity. The businessman pulled out his phone and began recording as well. Other customers followed suit. The circle of witnesses expanded, creating a human amphitheater around Dorothy and her tormentor. From the pharmacy section, Drive, Patricia Reeves, a local pediatrician picking up prescriptions, shook her head in disgust. This is absolutely unacceptable, she muttered to her companion. Someone needs to report this. Kevin's confidence peaked as he spotted District Manager Mike Rodriguez approaching from the front entrance. Mike had driven over from his regional rounds after receiving multiple customer complaint calls. But Kevin interpreted his arrival as validation. Perfect timing, Mike, Kevin called out. I'm handling this situation professionally, just like we discussed in my performance review. Mike took in the scene. The water puddle, the elderly black woman in a soaked dress, the crowd of filming customers, and Kevin's triumphant posture. His expression grew increasingly grim. Behind the deli counter, employees whispered among themselves. Maria Santos, who'd worked there for 8 years, shook her head in dismay. "He's finally gone too far," she told her coworker. "I've seen him be rude before, but this Kevin, what exactly happened here?" Mike's voice carried a warning Kevin completely missed. "This customer became belligerent when I explained our pricing policies," Kevin said smoothly. "She created this mess," he gestured at the puddle, "and now refuses to clean it up or leave the premises. I've maintained professionalism throughout, but some people just don't appreciate quality service." Dorothy checked her waterproof Cartier watch. 2:23 p.m. 7 minutes until Kevin's regional director called. She almost smiled. The crowd had grown to over 30 people. Most were filming, creating multiple angles of the confrontation. The story was already spreading beyond Sarah's live stream. Customers were posting to Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter with #Meridian Racism and #WaterAssault hashtags. Corporate social media mentions were spiking every 30 seconds. The Meridian customer service lines were jammed with angry callers demanding explanations. In boardrooms across the city, executives were being alerted to a developing crisis. Jessica fidgeted nervously beside Kevin. As assistant manager, she'd witnessed the entire incident, but had remained silent, hoping to avoid becoming involved. Now, with district management present and cameras rolling, her silence felt increasingly heavy. From the produce section, store employees gathered at a safe distance. Night shift supervisor Carlos Mendes had come in early and witnessed the tail end of the incident. "This is bad," he whispered to the produce manager. "Really bad, ma'am," Mike addressed Dorothy directly. "I apologize for any inconvenience. If you'd like to file a complaint, that won't be necessary," Dorothy interrupted softly. "I'm already in contact with the appropriate parties." Kevin laughed loudly. "See, she admits she's just looking for attention, probably hoping for some kind of settlement or social media fame." He turned to address the crowd. "This is exactly the kind of behavior that costs legitimate businesses money and reputation." A teenage employee from the deli counter had joined the crowd, her name tag reading Ma. She stared at Kevin with undisguised disgust. "Mr. Henderson," she whispered to Jessica. "This is really messed up." Jessica hushed her quickly, but the damage was spreading through the staff ranks. Word traveled fast in retail environments, and Kevin's reputation among employees had never been stellar. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Something about the woman's composure under extreme humiliation reminded him of his grandmother, a woman who'd faced down much worse than water and insults with the same quiet dignity. The water puddle had begun to attract maintenance attention. A janitor approached with a mop, but Kevin waved him away. "Leave it," he commanded. Evidence of the disturbance she created. "Kevin," Marcus said carefully. "Maybe we should handle this properly." "Absolutely," Kevin interrupted. "Ma'am, you have two choices. Clean up the mess you made and leave quietly or be escorted out by security. Either way, you're not welcome here anymore." Dorothy's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and nodded slightly, as if confirming something she'd been expecting. "Deep waters run still," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. Kevin checked his watch again. 25 p.m. 5 minutes until his career-defining call with Regional Director James Martinez. He could already imagine describing how he'd handled this difficult situation with poise and authority. The live stream viewer count hit 4,800. Comments poured in from across the city as the video was shared and reshared. Local news outlets were beginning to take notice. The Meridian corporate Twitter account was being bombarded with demands for explanation. Local reporter Jenny Kim from Channel 7 News had just received the tip and was already dispatching a crew. The story was transitioning from social media incident to mainstream news coverage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kevin announced to the crowd, playing to the cameras, "this is what professional retail management looks like. Sometimes we have to make tough decisions to protect our business and our valued customers." Several customers in the crowd exchanged disgusted looks. An elderly white woman near the bakery section shook her head visibly. A young father covered his daughter's eyes and steered her toward another aisle. Dorothy stood perfectly still in the center of the chaos. Water stains on her dress now serving as evidence of the assault. Her purse, methodically repacked, hung from her arm with the dignity of a diplomat's briefcase. "Time's up," Kevin declared dramatically. "Security, please escort this woman from the premises. She's officially trespassing." Marcus hesitated. Every instinct told him something was wrong with this picture, but Kevin was management and he was just security. "Ma'am," Marcus said reluctantly, "I'm going to have to ask you to." Dorothy's phone rang. She looked at the caller ID and smiled, the first genuine smile she'd shown since entering the store. "Perfect timing," she said quietly. Kevin was already walking toward the customer service desk to take his promotion call, confident he'd handled the situation masterfully. He had no idea the tide was about to turn. Dorothy answered her phone. "Hello, James." The name James cut through the store's chaos like a blade through silk. Dorothy's voice carried clearly across aisle 7 as she spoke into her phone. "Hi James, it's Dorothy. I'm at store 847, standing in a puddle of discrimination. We need to discuss Kevin Henderson's employment status immediately." Kevin froze mid-stride toward the customer service desk. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't place it. District Manager Mike Rodriguez, however, went pale as winter snow. "Mrs. Washington." The voice on Dorothy's phone was loud enough for nearby customers to hear. "Someone poured water on you. Jesus Christ, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Kevin's confident swagger faltered. "Washington," he muttered, his mind racing. The mandatory corporate training videos flashed through his memory. Something about diversity initiatives, board oversight, company leadership. Sarah's live stream chat exploded with speculation. Who is James? She knows someone high up. Plot twist incoming. Dorothy continued speaking calmly into her phone. "Yes, James. Kevin Henderson, store manager. He dumped water on my head, kicked my belongings across the floor, and has been making racially charged comments for the past 20 minutes. The color drained from Kevin's face like water from a broken dam. His hands began to shake as the pieces clicked into place. James Martinez, regional director. The same James Martinez he was supposed to impress in exactly 5 minutes. "Oh shit," Jessica whispered under her breath, finally recognizing the implications. Marcus stepped back respectfully, his security training overridden by pure instinct. Something fundamental had shifted in the room's power dynamics. "There's something else you should know about today's visit," Dorothy continued, her voice steady as bedrock. "This was my quarterly anonymous audit of Store 847's customer service standards." Kevin's promotion call was forgotten. He stumbled back toward the group. Wait, who are you?" Dorothy ended her call and looked directly at Kevin for the first time since he'd poured the water. Her eyes held the calm authority of someone accustomed to boardrooms and billion-dollar decisions. "Dorothy Washington," she said simply. "Member of Meridian Corporation's board of directors for 15 years. Former CEO of Washington Food Distribution, which your company acquired for $340 million in 2019. The silence that followed was absolute. Kevin's legs nearly buckled. The training video came flooding back. Dorothy Washington, board member, Diversity Initiative chairwoman, third largest individual shareholder. The woman whose signature was on every major corporate policy, including the zero-tolerance discrimination guidelines. "No," Kevin whispered. "You can't be. You were asking about honey prices." "I was conducting an anonymous customer experience audit," Dorothy explained calmly. "Standard board oversight procedure." "You failed catastrophically." The crowd pressed closer, sensing the seismic shift occurring before their eyes. Sarah's viewer count hit 6,200 as word spread across social media. The woman who'd been humiliated was actually the boss of the boss of the boss. Mike Rodriguez finally found his voice. "Mrs. Washington, I had no idea you were conducting an audit today." "If I had known." "The point of anonymous audits, Mike, is that no one knows," Dorothy replied. "That's how we discover the true character of our employees when they think no one important is watching." Kevin's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. His career, his promotion, his entire future crumbled like sand castles before an incoming tide. The water stains on Dorothy's dress suddenly looked less like evidence of a prank and more like proof of corporate liability. "I didn't know," Kevin stammered. I thought you were just you look like what, Kevin? Dorothy's voice carried the weight of authority that had once commanded boardrooms and closed multi-million-dollar deals. Like someone you felt comfortable assaulting with water. Like someone whose dignity was worthless to you. Jessica backed away from Kevin as if he'd become radioactive. Her own career prospects had just shifted dramatically. She needed to distance herself from this disaster immediately. The live stream comments were moving too fast to read, but the sentiment was clear. The internet had just witnessed the most spectacular workplace karma in recent memory. Mrs. Washington, Mike interjected desperately. I want to assure you that Kevin's behavior doesn't represent Meridian's values. Doesn't it? Dorothy interrupted. Kevin felt comfortable enough to pour water on an elderly black woman in front of 30 witnesses and multiple cameras. He assumed I was powerless, worthless, someone he could humiliate without consequences. That suggests he's done this before. Marcus nodded slowly. He has, he said quietly. I've seen him be dismissive toward certain customers. Kevin spun toward Marcus, betrayal written across his face. You can't. I can and I will, Marcus replied firmly. Mrs. Washington, I've witnessed at least 6 incidents of Kevin treating minority customers poorly over the past year. I should have reported it. Dorothy pulled out her cracked reading glasses and carefully positioned them on her nose. Despite the water damage, they still served their purpose. Kevin, in your employee handbook, page 23. What does it say about discrimination and bias incidents? Kevin's hands shook as the full weight of his situation crashed down. Immediate termination. But I didn't mean you didn't mean to pour water on my head. You didn't mean to kick my belongings. You didn't mean to tell me that expensive water was too good for dirty people like me. Dorothy's voice remained calm, but each word landed like a hammer blow. The crowd murmured angrily. Several customers called out their disgust. The teenage employee, Maya, shook her head in disbelief at her former boss. Furthermore, Dorothy continued, as a board member overseeing diversity compliance, I have authority to implement immediate personnel actions pending full investigation. Kevin's phone buzzed. A call from Regional Director James Martinez. The promotion interview that would now become a termination meeting. Aren't you going to answer that? Dorothy asked, glancing at Kevin's phone. I believe James was expecting your call. Kevin stared at the phone like it was a venomous snake. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd built, destroyed by his own cruelty and arrogance. Dorothy's water-stained dress had become a symbol of something far greater than Kevin's small-minded prejudice. The puddle at her feet was no longer evidence of her humiliation. It was proof of his crime. There's one more thing you should know, Kevin, Dorothy said softly. I hold 8.3% of Meridian Corporation stock. That's currently valued at approximately $2.89 billion. The number hung in the air like smoke. Kevin had humiliated a woman worth nearly $3 billion, thinking she was powerless. The regional director you were so eager to impress. He reports to people who report to me. Dorothy's smile was gentle but devastating. Your career isn't just over, Kevin. It never existed in the first place. Kevin's phone continued buzzing with James Martinez's call. The promotion interview that was supposed to crown his career had become a death nail echoing through aisle 7. Dorothy stood in her water-stained dress like a general surveying a conquered battlefield. Answer it, Kevin. Don't keep James waiting. With trembling fingers, Kevin accepted the call. His voice cracked as he spoke. Hello, Mr. Martinez. Kevin, what the hell is going on over there? James's voice boomed through the speakerphone, audible to the growing crowd. I've got corporate breathing down my neck about some incident involving a board member. Please tell me it's not true. Kevin's eyes darted between Dorothy and the 30-plus witnesses surrounding him. Sarah's live stream had reached 8,400 viewers. The chat scrolling with vindication and celebration. There's been a misunderstanding. Kevin stammered. A misunderstanding. Dorothy stepped forward, her voice carrying across the store with boardroom authority. James, this is Dorothy Washington. Kevin poured water on my head, physically assaulted me, and spent 20 minutes delivering racially charged harassment in front of multiple witnesses. The silence on the other end of the call stretched like eternity. When James finally spoke, his voice was hollow. Mrs. Washington, I am profoundly sorry. I'm in my car now. 5 minutes out. Dorothy consulted her damaged Cartier watch. Perfect timing. Kevin's employment status needs immediate attention. The enormity of Kevin's mistake was becoming clear to everyone present. He had humiliated one of the most powerful people in the entire corporate structure. The woman he'd dismissed as worthless controlled 8.3% of Meridian Corporation, a stake worth $2.89 billion. Mrs. Washington, Mike Rodriguez interjected desperately. As district manager, I want to assure you that immediate corrective action will be insufficient. Dorothy cut him off smoothly. Kevin's behavior today violated Section 4.7 of our corporate diversity policy, 3 separate provisions of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and multiple state discrimination statutes. The legal liability exposure ranges from $50,000 to $500,000 in penalties alone. Kevin's face had turned ashen. The math was simple and devastating. Meridian Corporation's annual revenue of $34.8 billion, Store 847's contribution of $12.4 million, his own salary of $67,000, all dwarfed by Dorothy's ownership stake. From behind the deli counter, employees whispered among themselves. Word had spread through the staff like wildfire. Maria Santos shook her head in amazement. Did you hear? She owns part of the whole company. Kevin just attacked his own boss. Jessica Torres had quietly migrated to the far edge of the crowd, trying to blend into the bakery section. Her association with Kevin was now a career liability she needed to minimize immediately. She pulled out her phone, frantically texting other managers about distancing herself from the incident. Dorothy continued her corporate devastation with surgical precision. Furthermore, this incident has generated significant social media exposure. The hashtag Meridian Racism has been mentioned 47,000 times in the past 30 minutes. Our stock price could face immediate pressure when markets open Monday. The financial implications rippled through the crowd. Several customers were Meridian shareholders themselves, watching their investment potentially tank because of one manager's prejudice. Corporate reputation damage from discrimination incidents typically results in 12% customer loss within 6 months. Dorothy continued, her voice clinical and devastating. For Store 847, that represents approximately $1.5 million in lost annual revenue. Kevin's legs finally gave out. He slumped against an endcap display of organic pasta. His breathing shallow and rapid. The promotion he'd been celebrating was gone. His career was gone. His future was gone. Dr. Patricia Reeves, the pediatrician who'd been picking up prescriptions, stepped forward. Mrs. Washington, I want you to know that many of us here are appalled by what we witnessed. This man does not represent our community's values. Thank you, Dr. Dorothy replied graciously. Your presence as witnesses ensures this incident will have proper documentation. The crowd continued growing as word spread through the store. Customers abandoned their shopping to witness the corporate execution unfolding in ISISL 7. Even off-duty employees had begun arriving, drawn by texts and social media posts about the drama. Let me be very clear about the immediate consequences, Dorothy announced to the crowd, ensuring maximum coverage for the live stream audience. Kevin Henderson's employment with Meridian Corporation is terminated effective immediately. The crowd erupted in applause. Sarah's chat exploded with celebration emojis and victory declarations. The viewer count had climbed past 10,000 as the video was shared across multiple platforms. Security protocols require immediate escort from the premises, Dorothy continued. Kevin, you have exactly 10 minutes to collect personal items from your office under supervision. Marcus stepped forward professionally. Ma'am, I'll handle the escort personally. Kevin looked up from his collapsed position, desperation replacing arrogance. Please, Mrs. Washington, I have a mortgage, car payments. I didn't know who you were. If I had known exactly, Dorothy replied with devastating calm. If you had known I was powerful, you would have treated me with respect. That reveals the true nature of your character, Kevin. You judge people's worth by your perception of their power. The philosophical point landed like a physical blow. Kevin had condemned himself with his own words. Around the crowd, customers nodded in agreement. His defense had become his most damning admission. Maya, the teenage deli worker, whispered to her coworker, he's basically saying he treats people badly on purpose unless he thinks they're important. That's so messed up. Regional Director James Martinez burst through the store's front entrance, his tie askew, and sweat on his forehead despite the cool weather. He spotted the crowd immediately and pushed through to reach Dorothy. "Mrs. Washington," he said breathlessly. "I cannot begin to express how sorry." "James, we need to discuss immediate systemic changes," Dorothy interrupted, her tone shifting to pure business efficiency. "This incident reveals fundamental failures in management, training, cultural oversight, and customer service standards." James nodded rapidly, pulling out his phone to take notes. Behind him, a Channel 7 News cameraman had entered the store, drawn by social media reports of the incident. "Absolutely. Whatever you recommend," James said, sweat beading on his forehead. Dorothy gestured toward the water puddle that had started everything. "First, mandatory unconscious bias training for all management personnel, quarterly rather than annual. Second, customer dignity protocols with specific behavioral guidelines. Third, a real-time incident reporting system with direct escalation to board level." Kevin watched his former boss frantically scribbling notes about programs that would never have been necessary if he'd simply treated an elderly woman with basic respect. "Fourth," Dorothy continued, "AI-powered surveillance upgrade to monitor for discriminatory behavior patterns. The technology exists to detect bias in real time through speech pattern analysis and body language recognition." The crowd listened in fascination as Dorothy systematically rebuilt the store's entire operational framework around the crater Kevin had created. Her business acumen was as impressive as her grace under pressure. Fifth Community Advisory Board establishment with quarterly listening sessions. Local NAACP leadership, religious organizations, and minority business owners will have direct input on store policies. James typed furiously on his phone, copying every recommendation. "These are excellent initiatives, Mrs. Washington. Corporate will implement immediately." "What about Kevin's replacement?" James asked. Dorothy glanced toward Marcus, who had maintained professional dignity throughout the entire incident. "Marcus Williams has demonstrated integrity under pressure. I recommend his immediate promotion to interim management while we conduct a full search." Marcus's eyes widened. "Mrs. Washington, I thank you. I won't let you down." "You already proved that by speaking up when it mattered," Dorothy replied. "Integrity cannot be taught, but it can be rewarded." Kevin remained slumped against the pasta display, watching his former subordinate receive the promotion that should have been his. The irony was devastating. If he'd treated Dorothy with basic human dignity, he'd be celebrating his advancement instead of witnessing his professional execution. Carlos Mendez, the night supervisor who'd arrived early, shook his head. "Marcus deserves it. He's always been fair to everyone, not like Kevin." "There will also be financial consequences for the community," Dorothy announced. "I'm establishing a $500,000 Dignity Spring Scholarship Fund for local students, administered through the NAACP and funded personally." The crowd's approval was overwhelming. Sarah's live stream comments praised Dorothy's grace and strategic thinking. The scholarship announcement was already being shared beyond the original video. Additionally, Store 847 will become our flagship location for diversity training initiatives. Every Meridian employee will rotate through this store for sensitivity education. James scribbled frantically. "Incredible vision, Mrs. Washington. This could become a model for the entire industry." Dorothy's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it and smiled slightly. The Channel 7 News crew just arrived in the parking lot. "James, you'll need to prepare a statement about our commitment to dignified customer service." Kevin's humiliation was about to become public record, broadcast across the city as an example of workplace discrimination consequences. Finally, Dorothy said, turning back to Kevin one last time, "You'll be receiving a certified letter regarding potential civil litigation. My legal team will review whether criminal assault charges are appropriate for the water incident." Kevin's collapse was complete. Professional destruction, financial ruin, and possible criminal charges, all stemming from 30 seconds of thoughtless cruelty. The corporate legal department estimates damages between $2 and $5 million for this incident, Dorothy continued. Brand reputation recovery, lost revenue, legal fees, settlement costs, and regulatory compliance expenses. Kevin's face went completely white. He'd cost the company more money in 20 minutes than he would have earned in his entire career. Dorothy picked up her purse with quiet dignity. The water stains on her dress had dried to faint marks, but the evidence would live forever in dozens of phone recordings and security footage. "Kevin," she said softly. "This could have been avoided with simple human decency. I hope you remember that in whatever comes next." As security prepared to escort Kevin from the building, Dorothy turned toward the crowd that had witnessed his downfall. "Thank you all for being here today. Your presence ensured that justice flowed like water, finding its proper level." The tsunami had passed, leaving only devastation in its wake. 3 hours later, Kevin Henderson sat in his Honda Civic in the Meridian parking lot, a cardboard box of personal belongings on his passenger seat. His office nameplate lay on top. Kevin Henderson, store manager, now as worthless as scrap metal. The Channel 7 News van was still parked near the entrance. Reporter Jenny Kim had just finished interviewing Dorothy and James Martinez about Meridian's commitment to inclusive customer service. Kevin watched through his windshield as Dorothy emerged from the store. No longer in her water-stained dress, but wearing a crisp navy blazer that had been delivered from her car. She looked every inch the corporate board member she'd always been. Kevin's phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. The incident had exploded across social media platforms worldwide. #water assault and #Meridian justice were trending in 12 countries. His face was already appearing in international news articles with headlines like "Manager's career washes away after racist attack" and "Corporate board member delivers justice after water assault." His LinkedIn profile showed 17 connection requests, all from employment lawyers offering their services for the inevitable civil litigation. Local news stations had picked up the story. Channel 5, Channel 9, and Fox affiliate reporters were setting up for evening broadcasts. Kevin's humiliation was becoming prime-time entertainment across 3 major markets. Inside the store, Marcus Williams was receiving his crash course in management responsibilities from district manager Mike Rodriguez. The promotion had happened so fast that Marcus still wore his security uniform, but a temporary acting manager badge was pinned to his chest. "First priority is staff morale," Mike explained, clearly shaken by the day's events. "Everyone's rattled by what happened to Kevin. They need to see strong, fair leadership immediately." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "A lot of employees have been talking about Kevin's behavior for months. This wasn't his first incident, just his worst one." Behind them, corporate crisis management teams were arriving in waves. Public relations specialists, legal advisors, diversity consultants, and technology implementation crews transformed the store into a bustling command center for damage control and systematic reform. The conversation was interrupted by Jessica Torres approaching nervously. As assistant manager, her position was precarious. She'd been Kevin's second in command and had remained silent during his attack on Dorothy. "Marcus, I wanted to apologize," Jessica began. "I should have stopped Kevin earlier. I was thinking about my own career instead of doing what was right." Marcus considered this carefully. "Mrs. Washington mentioned that fear of retaliation often silences witnesses to discrimination. That's why we're implementing the anonymous reporting system." Within hours of Dorothy's departure, corporate implementation teams had begun installing revolutionary changes. The Clear as Water Transparency Initiative was launching immediately at Store 847. Technology specialists were installing upgraded surveillance systems with AI bias detection capabilities. The new software could analyze speech patterns, facial expressions, and body language to identify potentially discriminatory interactions in real time. When concerning behavior was detected, alerts would be sent immediately to corporate oversight teams within 30 seconds. Dr. Sophia Martinez from corporate HR was conducting emergency sensitivity training for all staff members. "Discrimination isn't always obvious," she explained to the gathered employees. "Sometimes it's subtle tone of voice, body language, assumptions about customers based on appearance." Maya, the teenage deli worker, raised her hand. "What if we see something happening, but we're scared to speak up because of our jobs?" "That's exactly why we're implementing multiple reporting channels." Drive. Martinez replied. "Anonymous hotline, mobile app, direct corporate escalation. Your job will be protected, not threatened, for reporting bias." The corporate response extended far beyond Store 847. Meridian's executive team had initiated company-wide policy reviews. All 2,847 stores would receive mandatory bias training within 60 days. Kevin's termination was being used as a case study in corporate sensitivity workshops. The scholarship announcement had already generated enormous community excitement. Local NAACP President Robert Johnson arrived that evening to discuss implementation details with Dorothy, who had returned to oversee the transition personally. $500,000 will fund approximately 40 full scholarships for local students, Johnson explained to the small crowd that had gathered. This transforms Kevin's moment of hatred into decades of educational opportunity. Dorothy nodded with satisfaction. Water shapes stone through persistence, not force. These scholarships will shape our community's future through education and opportunity. The transformation extended beyond policy changes. Word had spread through the local community about Dorothy's dignity under attack and her gracious response. By evening, Store 847 was experiencing an unprecedented surge in customer traffic. Families drove from across the city to shop where justice had prevailed. The cash registers rang constantly as customers demonstrated their support through commerce. Sales for the day exceeded typical weekend totals by 43%, generating over $180,000 in additional revenue. "This is incredible," Marcus reported to James Martinez during an evening check-in call. "We've had customers driving here from 3 different counties just to show support." Local business owners were requesting meetings to discuss partnership opportunities with the newly reformed store. The Community Advisory Board had received over 200 volunteer applications within 6 hours of its announcement. Sarah's original live stream had been viewed over 2.3 million times across multiple platforms. Her follow-up videos documenting the store's transformation had garnered hundreds of thousands more views. She'd gained 340,000 new followers and had been contacted by civil rights organizations about partnering on future awareness campaigns. "This is what justice looks like in 2025, Sarah told her audience during her evening wrap-up stream. "Not violence, not revenge, but systematic change that lifts everyone up." Major media outlets were requesting interviews. CNN, NBC, and The Washington Post had reached out to Dorothy's office for exclusive access to the story. The incident was evolving from local news to national conversation about retail discrimination. The ripple effects were spreading throughout Meridian Corporation. Other stores were requesting priority implementation of the bias detection technology. Regional managers were scheduling voluntary sensitivity training sessions. Employee feedback surveys showed increased confidence in reporting workplace discrimination. Kevin's termination had become a teaching moment for the entire retail industry. Competitors were implementing similar policies to avoid their own discrimination scandals. Meanwhile, Kevin sat in his apartment scrolling through job listing websites with growing desperation. His industry reputation was destroyed. Google searches of his name returned 17 pages of articles about the discrimination incident. Employment background checks would reveal the circumstances of his termination forever. His savings account contained 3 months of expenses. His mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks. The legal consultation with 3 different attorneys had yielded the same advice. Expect a civil lawsuit with damages potentially exceeding his lifetime earning capacity. One lawyer had been particularly blunt. "You assaulted a woman worth $3 billion on camera while making racist comments. This will likely be the most expensive 20 minutes of your life." His personal relationships were crumbling. His girlfriend had broken up with him via text after seeing the viral video. Former friends were distancing themselves from the controversy. His professional network had evaporated overnight. The contrast between Kevin's downfall and the store's elevation could not have been starker. Where his career had been washed away, new opportunities were flowing like spring water. Marcus had already identified several employees for promotion opportunities. The increased customer traffic meant additional hours for part-time staff. The community partnership initiatives were creating new positions focused on customer advocacy and cultural liaison work. Mrs. Washington was right, Marcus reflected to his wife that evening. Sometimes what looks like an ending is actually the beginning. Dorothy's final action before leaving that day had been to install a small memorial plaque near the customer service desk. The inscription read, "Here, dignity flowed deeper than humiliation. Dorothy Washington, 2025. May this place always honor the worth of every person who enters." The water stain where Dorothy had stood was gone, professionally cleaned and buffed, but the memory of her grace under pressure had soaked into the store's culture permanently. Local news coverage that evening featured interviews with customers who had witnessed the incident. The unanimous sentiment was admiration for Dorothy's restraint and strategic response. "She could have destroyed him completely," said Dr. Patricia Reeves during her television interview. "Instead, she created something positive from his negativity. That's real leadership." The evening shift employees found themselves serving customers who specifically asked about the day's events. Each conversation became an opportunity to reinforce the store's new commitment to inclusive service. As the store closed at 10 p.m., Marcus walked through the aisles one final time. Tomorrow would bring corporate inspectors, media interviews, and the beginning of his management training program. But tonight, he simply stood where Dorothy had been humiliated and transformed humiliation into justice. The water fountain near the pharmacy gurgled softly. It sounded a gentle reminder that water always finds its way, and so does justice when guided by wisdom and dignity. Kevin's career had evaporated like spilled water on hot pavement. But from that same spot, Dorothy had created springs of positive change that would flow for years to come. 6 months later, Dorothy Washington stood before the gleaming memorial plaque in what was now called the Dignity Springs flagship store. The inscription had been expanded to include the date and a quote. Here, dignity flowed deeper than humiliation. Dorothy Washington, September 15, 2025. Water finds its way, and so does justice. The store bore little resemblance to the site of Kevin's crimes. Warm lighting, community artwork, and multilingual welcome signs created an atmosphere of inclusion that customers noticed immediately upon entering. Store 847 had become the most profitable location in Meridian's entire network. Customer satisfaction scores reached unprecedented levels. Employee retention hit company records. The Dignity Springs model was being replicated across all 2,847 stores nationwide. Marcus Williams, now permanent store manager, greeted Dorothy with professional warmth. His transformation from security guard to retail leader had become a corporate success story studied in business schools nationwide. "Mrs. Washington, the quarterly numbers are exceptional," Marcus reported, pulling up data on his tablet. "Customer complaints are down 94%, sales up 37%. Employee satisfaction at all-time highs." Dorothy smiled, reviewing the metrics that told a story of systematic change in the bias detection system. "0 incidents flagged in 4 months, Marcus replied proudly. AI monitoring combined with cultural training has created a completely different environment. The technology had proven revolutionary. Real-time analysis of customer interactions caught problematic behavior before it escalated. Staff received immediate coaching when patterns suggested unconscious bias. The system had prevented dozens of potential discrimination incidents across the store network. Sarah Lane had parlayed her viral live stream into a full-time advocacy career. Her Hidden Dignity series had documented discrimination in retail environments across the country, leading to policy changes at major corporations. She now worked with civil rights organizations using social media to expose injustice and celebrate positive change. "Dorothy's grace under pressure changed everything," Sarah explained to her 1.2 million followers during a recent anniversary live stream. "She showed us that true power flows like water, persistent, unstoppable, and ultimately transformative." The scholarship program had exceeded all expectations. 43 local students were now attending college with full Dignity Springs scholarships. Their stories filled the store's community bulletin board: pre-med students, future teachers, aspiring engineers, all benefiting from the fund created by Kevin's moment of hatred. Jasmine Parker, the program's first recipient, had just completed her freshman year at Howard University. Her thank you letter to Dorothy was framed near the customer service desk. "Your strength in that moment created my opportunity for a lifetime. I'm studying civil rights law because of your example." The Community Advisory Board met monthly in the store's new conference room. Local leaders collaborated with corporate representatives to ensure inclusive policies remained effective and responsive to community needs. Dorothy's influence extended far beyond Meridian Corporation. Her handling of the incident had become a case study taught in diversity training programs nationwide. Business schools analyzed her strategic response as a masterclass in transforming crisis into opportunity. The legal proceedings against Kevin had concluded months earlier. The civil settlement remained confidential, but court documents indicated substantial damages for assault, discrimination, and emotional distress. Kevin had declared bankruptcy and moved to another state. His retail career permanently ended. His former life served as a cautionary tale. Employment lawyers now used his case to educate clients about the consequences of workplace discrimination. The Kevin Henderson settlement had become shorthand for the financial devastation that discrimination could bring to individuals and corporations. Jessica Torres had completed her management rehabilitation program and now oversaw diversity compliance for the regional district. Her experience as a bystander to discrimination informed her passionate advocacy for intervention training. "I learned that silence in the face of injustice makes you complicit," Jessica explained during a recent corporate training session. "We have to find courage to speak up when we see something wrong happening." The ripple effects continued spreading through the retail industry. Competitors had implemented similar bias detection systems. Industry publications regularly featured articles about the Dorothy Washington effect on corporate culture and customer service standards. Dr. Patricia Reeves, who had witnessed the original incident, now served on Meridian's corporate diversity board. Her medical background brought valuable perspective to discussions about the psychological impact of discrimination on both customers and employees. "That day, I saw dignity triumph over hatred, drive," Reeves reflected during a recent board meeting. "Dorothy showed us that power used wisely creates lasting change, not just temporary victory." The Channel 7 News story had won a regional Emmy Award for Outstanding Community Impact Journalism. Reporter Jenny Kim credited Dorothy's cooperation and insight for making the story resonate beyond typical discrimination coverage. Local high schools now included the incident in their social studies curricula. Students analyzed the power dynamics, legal implications, and social media impact as a comprehensive lesson in modern civil rights. The store's memorial plaque had become an unofficial pilgrimage site. Visitors from around the country stopped to see where dignity had prevailed over discrimination. Tour groups included it in civil rights history walks through the city. Dorothy's quarterly board meetings now included mandatory presentations on diversity metrics from every regional division. The accountability had transformed corporate culture from reactive to proactive on discrimination prevention. True power flows like water. Dorothy often reminded corporate executives. It finds its level naturally when guided by principles rather than prejudice. The financial impact validated her approach. Meridian's stock price had reached record highs, driven partly by positive publicity surrounding the company's diversity leadership. Investors recognized that inclusive practices generated measurable returns. Employee surveys revealed profound cultural shifts. Staff reported increased confidence in addressing bias, stronger sense of corporate support, and pride in working for a company that demonstrated genuine commitment to equality. Maya, the teenage deli worker who had witnessed Kevin's attack, was now studying business management with a Dignity Springs scholarship. Her essay about that day had been published in the local newspaper. "I learned that being young doesn't excuse staying silent when someone needs help." The anniversary of the incident was marked by community celebration rather than commemoration of trauma. Local leaders gathered to honor the positive changes that had emerged from Kevin's moment of cruelty. Dorothy addressed the crowd gathered in the store's expanded community space. "6 months ago, a man poured water on my head thinking he was drowning my dignity. Instead, he created the spring that would irrigate positive change throughout our community." The evening concluded with Dorothy participating in a ceremonial handwashing at the store's new water fountain installed near the memorial plaque. Community members lined up to join her, symbolically cleansing away the memory of hatred while celebrating the triumph of justice. As the crowd dispersed, Dorothy stood alone beside the fountain, listening to the gentle sound of flowing water. Her reflection in the clear surface showed a woman who had transformed personal humiliation into systemic change. "From drops to rivers," she whispered, remembering the journey from Kevin's assault to this moment of community celebration. Call to action. Share your watershed moment. When did injustice become the spring of your strength? Comment below and let your story join our flowing river of change. Like this video if Dorothy's dignity inspired you. Subscribe to Hidden Turns. Every subscription is a drop that creates our tsunami of positive change. Your support keeps these dignity springs flowing. Screenshot Dorothy's water wisdom and share it everywhere. Let her strength become the flood that washes away discrimination wherever it hides. Together, we're not just drops. We're the ocean itself, rising with unstoppable force. Follow #DignityFlows and joins the movement proving that quiet strength changes the world one interaction at a time.